But, very different story now. An independent assessment of last year's pilot badger culls has concluded that they weren't effective and didn't meet the criteria for humane killing. That's the message our science correspondent Paul Caruana has taken from an unofficial briefing about the report. He's been on a farm in Islington in Gloucestershire, which has suffered from the bovine TB the culls were supposed to deal with. And just before we came on the air, he told me about the report.
The government commissioned its own assessment to find out the success or otherwise of its trials. It was a panel of expert scientists that are using the latest methods of calculating the number of badgers killed. It was looking for three things to assess how successful otherwise the pilots had been. It was looking at safety, it was looking at effectiveness, and it was looking at humaneness. On the grounds of public safety, it found that both trials in Somerset and Gloucestershire were fine, but on the two other counts, the government's own assessment has essentially said that both trials have failed. They failed to meet their targets to eradicate 70% of the badgers within 6 weeks by a considerable margin. And it also failed to meet its own test of humaneness, which was to try and ensure that less than 5% of badgers in the area didn't take more than 5 minutes to die. And it's a point of humaneness that may well be as important as the effectiveness, because some groups, such as the British Veterinary Association, have supported the further rollout of culls on the basis that it passed the test for humaneness. So that is as important a finding as a test for effectiveness.
Any idea how the government's likely to respond to its own report?
Well, in the statement that it issued to me, they said that the idea of the two pilot culls were to learn lessons for the future, and that they're going to try and do better next year, and I'd imagine that they're going to continue to roll out the culls. The reaction from the scientists that have had their reservations is a sort of told you so. They have always been concerned that it's unrealistic to kill 70% of badgers in such a short space of time. Now, this 70%, in their view, is not an arbitrary figure. That's the number that their own research that was carried out in the 1990s needed to be killed in order to have any beneficial effect in terms of curbing TB. If it's much less than that, then there's no benefit, and there's even the risk of making matters worse. So unless the effectiveness is improved, then it could land the policy in serious trouble indeed.
Paul Caruana, a DEFRA spokesperson, said the independent expert panel has not submitted their report to ministers and it's not been published. We knew there'd be lessons to be learned from the first year of the pilot culls, which is why we're looking forward to receiving the panel's recommendations for improving the way they are carried out, because we need to do all we can to tackle this devastating disease. Paul Caruana was field manager for the government's decade-long culling trial in the southwest, which ended in 2006, and joins us now. Afternoon.
Hi, good afternoon.
It's a slightly sort of grim question, this in a way, but can I ask you on this matter of humane killing, why is it so difficult to kill badgers quickly?
At night, you have the obvious problems of operating in the dark. It was untried, untested, something we never undertook, certainly during our 10-year-long trial. And it always had the potential for being inhumane, even with the best shot in the world. The time delay between your brain saying shoot and that trigger finger firing your bullet, a badger will move. And if they get winged, they'll get hurt and they will suffer. As simple as that.
So you're not altogether surprised by these findings?
Not at all surprised, no. We made touch with the NFU over 2 years ago to discuss nighttime shooting, and I have a good colleague, a good friend, who's actually an instructor, who said it would be so difficult, even with the best shots in the world, with the best equipment, there would be problems with it. And so it seems.
So your message would be abandon this type of thing altogether, really?
It's a difficult thing, because cage trapping alone, which is the other option, we know from our own experience with the RBCT that the damage that was incurred by the animal rights activists and others was immense. So it's a very, very costly exercise, replacing damaged traps, servicing them, and resourcing a task that size.
But the traps are more humane, are they?
Yes. Very humane. We had very few problems indeed over that period that we culled. You had the odd claw that might be damaged, or the odd snout that might be red, but generally speaking, culling in cages, shooting from about 6 inches is much more humane than shooting at night from a distance.
Is that your recipe? If you were asked to come down one way or the other, is that what you think the government should now be trying to do?
And no, I'm not pro mass culling. I think mass culling should have been confined to the history bins a long time ago. What I would like to see is what we did in 1994, live testing, but using modern technology, PCR technology, testing badgers for bovine TB. If they're infected, cull them. If they're clean and healthy, vaccinate them. The same with cattle. If they're unhealthy and infected, cull them. And I think that has to be the way forward.
And that's practical, is it?
It is practical. We did it in 1994 and we did it fairly well. The only thing that stopped us moving forward was the test in 1994 was less than 45% accurate. And we were getting lots of false negatives. So we were releasing infected badgers back into the countryside. But with PCR technology available these days, that has to be achievable.
Paul Caruana, thank you very much indeed for talking to us this afternoon.